ancient gods in the sky. Open up my third eye. Take a look, it's in a book, the Occult Book Club. They will go anywhere with texts so rare and knowledge to share. The Occult Book Club. They will say anything in pages of old and secrets untold. The Occult Book Club. The Occult Book Club.
Welcome back to another episode of the Occult Book Club. Hold on, let me find it.
It was worth the wait.
We're back. We're giving the people what they wanted, and we're here. Thomas is queer, and my camera's not working because the Illuminati. I don't know. Something is doing my camera. I can turn it on and I'm just going to lag it. There you go. That's my camera right there.
I mean,
Awesome,
a little Juan is better than no Juan.
You think so? I mean, I might come back here and there, but who cares?
Yeah,
so
it'll be like watching an old time movie. And let me just ask you to stop with the queer stuff. It was funny before, but I just heard that Donald Trump has made it a felony. So to be queer in the United States now for the next 4 years.
My apologies.
Don't get the heat off of me, please.
My apologies. I did not mean to offend, sir. I'm sorry for anyone listening.
I'm not offended. I don't want to be looked into under the authorities because it's now illegal.
Gotcha. All right. Well, he is not queer, and he is in fact not even here. So welcome back to another episode of the Occult Book Club. It's been far too long. The last book that we covered was the infamous 5.5 hour episode.
No.
Bach. That was the last one.
That was that's where we left it. We left it.
That's where we left it. A 5.5 hour that almost cost us our relationships. It almost destroyed our families. It
started fights in the occult world. And there was fallout. There was like legitimate fallout from that episode.
Oh my god, dude, that was so crazy. That's still not even like out publicly on my episode. It's not my proudest fap, if I had to say. So if you want to check
I release it all over the place. I believe in truth with 2 capital T's in it. So
you
I
blasted
put it out
it off everywhere. You were just blasting it off all over the place, just all over the walls and everything. So if you want to check that out, you can find it somewhere. I'm not going to tell you where, but you can find it. So today we're gathered here today to talk about a banger of a book that I've read already twice now. And I'm going to be honest, it didn't really slap that hard the second time around. So we're going to be talking about some homunculus goodness today. We're going to show you today. We're going to expose the true recipe and the true method of creating a real homunculus that any one of you right now listening could do yourself. I even thought about doing it myself. I might even do it live to try and prove this theory, this method, I guess. It only takes 9 months, 275 days. So it's not.
But you also have to be pure of heart.
But you have to be pure of heart. So we're going to be talking today about this particular work that I had discovered through Mark Stavish's work. Mark Stavish here, The Magical World of Joseph Lisiewski. Is that how you want to say it?
Lisiewski. I believe it's Lisiewski. It's a Polish last name. That's how I'll say it.
Lisiewski. Okay, I'm going to say Lisiewski probably at one point in time. That's how I just learned to read it, right? So I heard this through Mark Stavish. I did reach out to Mark Stavish to come on the show, the Juan podcast, but he never wrote back to me. Guess I'm not cool enough for him. Who cares?
If I would have wrote him, you probably would have responded.
Probably. who cares if he came on or not? Anyways, I wanted to talk to him about this particular character because I had learned about him through Phoenix Aurelius, which I had on the show a while back, who is a real life alchemist. And he's like, well, if you want to learn about the homunculus, you should look into Lisiewski or Lisiewski's work, because he created one during his time at the Paracelsus or Para Alchemy Society over in Utah at one point, which we're going to get into and all that stuff. But today's book is called Israel Regardie and the Philosopher's Stone, the Alchemical Arts Brought Down to Earth by Joseph C. Lisiewski, Ph.D., or Lisiewski. You can say it however you want. I've heard Mark Savage say it a few times. He says that sometimes he put a V in there, sometimes he didn't. Doesn't really matter. Who cares? So we're going to be talking about that. So we're going to cover. You want me to pull your screen up, bro?
Yeah, I found a good little background on Lisiewski. So there was this was actually run by Mark Stavish. It was a Kickstarter, The Magical World of Dr. Lisiewski. So this book raised a whole bunch of money, but it also has this whole background on Lisiewski. So on this Kickstarter page by Mark Stavish, I assume that he wrote this.
Before you get into that, I want the one main thing that Joseph is known for, like his magnum opus, was allegedly manifesting a demon to the physical. He said that he did that on multiple occasions, which is very interesting because, again, I consider the occult and the esoteric a conspiracy, because it's like, hey, are demons real? Are angels real? Can you control them? Can you let them touch your ball sack? Like, what can you make them do that is real, right? And again, this is what this guy was truly known for. So go ahead.
Well, we've got images of the types of creatures that Lisiewski was able to manifest. So technically, yeah, you could make it touch your balls, but I don't know if it can do anything cool with the balls when it's touching them.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? And so we'll show, I guess, I don't know how much we want to like tease that, but let's describe who Lisiewski is first, and then maybe we can get right into the waterworks.
Yes.
So it's okay. Few figures in modern occultism have garnered the admiration and vitriol as Dr. Joseph Lisiewski. After a terrifying evocation at the age of 17, he found himself involved with two of the greatest occultists in the 20th century, Israel Regardie and Frater Albertus. And I want to say, too, that I believe that Israel Regardie kind of becomes Lisiewski's main mentor in this particular book. He's able to study with Frater Albertus, but it seems like this guy's more of like a disconnected sort of Hogwarts teacher. Like, he's not chilling with him every day, but Israel Regardie is sort of his like everyday mentor, or at least much closer. And Israel Regardie was able to work with not just Frater Albertus, but also Aleister Crowley. Do I have all that right? You're the expert on this.
Yeah, so I haven't, and I'll be honest, I have never really looked into Regardie. I do have some of his books, but he's mostly known for allegedly like exposing the OTO at one point. And yeah, his work with Crowley, he was very involved with him, which we can get into some of his biography here. But of course, he was Jewish. So
why is that gonna chuckle?
I mean, I'm just saying, bro.
So the book about from Dr. Joseph Lisiewski, he kind of operates as a similar figure, but he doesn't know Aleister Crowley. Obviously, he's too far removed. But that, just like Israel Regardie was this bridge between old world, real Hermetic dawn, thelemic magic into modern day. And then Dr. Joseph Lisiewski kind of continues that tradition, at least until 2016 when he died. So more on the bio. It says that born in the rugged coal mining region of central Pennsylvania, Lisiewski came of an age and an era when the grip of religious orthodoxy was waning, but the magical world of counterculture movement was not yet fully born. So he was born in 1947 and died in 2016. Like almost 10 years ago. So that's him in the bridge, but he also was sort of this counterculture guy. So all the alchemy that we read about him doing and throughout this book, this is sort of on the tail end of like 60s, 70s. I think some of it approaches into like the 1980s, which is kind of a unique time period, because usually when you read about alchemists, even if it's like a modern alchemist, you're still talking about World War II or earlier. It's usually like late 1800s, early 1900s. But now we're talking about the 70s and the 80s, and he's making his best work for the 70s and 80s.
And that's why I found it so interesting, because a lot of people go, well, you know, can you prove the homunculus, or can you prove all this other stuff? It's like, no, but I can talk to you about dudes who allegedly did the work, right? And they all found their way. And Lisiewski, which I've been meaning to do an episode on, which this is it, I guess. He was the guy that allegedly did this in modern time. And I'm sure there are other people too, if you want to count like Parsons and all these other guys, which he was born at the tail end of that. He was born right when he was born the year Crowley died, and obviously didn't get to meet him. But as we'll see, there was his interactions with Israel Regardie, who was involved with Crowley for a while, from what I picked up on. It seemed like it made it seem like Crowley touched him inappropriately. Like their last interaction that he talks about is like, he hurt me beyond belief, and I couldn't forgive him for that. And that's why I published the book on the Philosopher's Stone. And yeah, we'll get to it. But yeah, so there's not a lot about this Lisiewski guy other than a bunch of his books. But as far as a good biography, if you want to check out that particular book, The Magical World, it breaks down his life. And then from that book is that I found this book that we're covering today, which gets a lot more in depth. Yeah, we're going to be covering this today. We're going to be covering the true art of how to create a real homunculus, which it seems pretty straightforward. There is some steps you have to follow as far as pH level and all this other stuff, but it's allegedly based on the Golden Chain of Homer, which is an ancient text that Golden Chain of Homer. Let me see when that was published. That was published in 1723. Wouldn't call it ancient, but older. And you could allegedly create these crustaceans in the water, and this substance called the gur, this primordial substance that you then use to create the homunculus. I don't know. I mean,
let's just show a picture of it right now. Then let's just get this over with.
Oh, we're getting in it, bro.
Because the whole time they kind of talk about this water work being the lead up to creating an actual homunculus. That it all starts with collecting your rainwater and processing it over the course of you have to electrify the rainwater. But at a certain point, you're going to have this little crustacean sort of entity, and this is the proof. This is the one that he keeps bigging up the entire time. And I don't know what I'm seeing right now. It almost looks like a scab that you would pick off of like your leg or something, and then it got a little bit wet. Like I don't see any real bone structure or anything. Although I don't want to just start being overly critical, because this is still better than any homunculus that I've tried to make so far. So I don't know how much I'm allowed to criticize this particular type of homunculus.
How dare you say it? Are you insinuating that the homunculus is not real? Is that where you're getting it?
I have a higher bar for what I would accept as a homunculus, and this seems more like homunculus discharge.
Yes. So did you finish on Lisiewski, his biography, before we dive into this?
I mean, he was a wacky guy, and he was into modern day alchemy. I don't know how much more you want to get into it. I think that his statements from the book that we read sort of describe him as a person, and it looks like he gets a lot of his influence from again Israel Regardie and Frater, but also he kind of likes the hot goss. Like he likes to give you some insight on the drama that was kind of going on behind the scenes between these alchemists, and like the disagreements they were having and what the disagreements were over. For example, you mentioned that some of this work takes place in like a lab, like a Paracelsian lab in the 70s. I think it got defunct in the 80s, and then it moved, or at least the premise of it moved overseas to Australia in the 90s, and then it just sort of faded back out maybe less than 10 years ago, probably around the same time that Dr. Joseph died. That was, I think, the tail end of this laboratory. But in this lab was one of the many different points of contention. So it got built, I believe, in Salt Lake City, Utah, not just anywhere in Utah, but like the heartland of Mormonism. And I feel like there's a link here to that, but I won't go on too many tangents. But that in Salt Lake City, but that it was founded in Salt Lake City by Israel Regardie, because Israel Regardie thought that it looked close to Dresden, which was the last place in Germany he was at before he fled to the United States. And that when he saw Salt Lake City, it reminded him so much of the last time he had seen these like snow-capped mountain peaks and that just particular type of skyline, that he was convinced that that's where he was going to put this lab up. And him moving that lab and doing his work in Salt Lake City kind of became a huge point of contention between him and Albertus, Frater Albertus, and with Lisiewski. And that I guess over time, Lisiewski notices that there's research coming out of this weird lab that he had heard about in Salt Lake City. So it seems incredibly important, the location in which this alchemical school was, like an alchemical lab, and also the fact that it created like a divide, because Lisiewski in this book mentions something that I thought was really interesting, and that was the West Coast, specifically California, was attracting all of these alchemists. Like if you wanted to be in Golden Dawn, or if you wanted to learn alchemy in any capacity, it was pretty much California was the place to go. And by this new alchemical lab being set up in Salt Lake City, it kind of bucked that entire trend. And it also implies that it kind of damned part of the possible outcome, because they were no longer able to fish from like this huge pool where everyone was going to. You had to like entice someone to leave California and come to Salt Lake City, which almost implied you had to be so beyond serious about it. You couldn't have been there for like the girls or the sun or the beach, right? Like if you're like, all right, now I'll go to Salt Lake City, you're giving up all of those like worldly sort of possessions in a way, right? And you're going to dedicate your life directly to this like alchemical work.
Yeah, the true alchemist way. You're definitely not getting bitches through alchemy unless you go to like a yoga studio and you can find some there. So Frater Albertus Spagirix, Albert Richard Riddell, born May 5th, founder of the Paracelsus Research Society in Salt Lake City, which later evolved into Paracelsus College, based on the Paracelsian concept of three essentials: body, soul, and spirit. Frater Albertus developed a system of teaching alchemical concepts using the Spagiric teaching of separation and cohabitation. The unique graduated courses allowed students to explore aspects of the vegetable, mineral, and animal kingdoms in an understandable and accessible way. After his death in 1984, the college ceased operations in the United States, but continued to carry on the tradition in Australia. Frater Albertus had a profound effect on the way alchemy, and particularly the Spagiric method, was disseminated and understood in the mid to late 20th century. His works were translated into many languages. He was a Rosicrucian of the AMORC, and he's got a ton of written works that he did, and also Paracelsus College, Australia. So he died in So this is what's interesting, right? Because after his death in 1984, but then if you go and look on the alchemywebsite.com, in 1984, Frater Albertus came to Australia to teach for the last time. He appointed Gregory Snedon as the administrator of Paracelsus College, Australia. After the death of Frater Albertus, the college undertook to continue the oral teachings with Greg and the valuable input of Dr. Werner Nawrocki from Germany. During this time of transition, Greg began training a few students to teach the college curriculum. In March 1990, Greg made a decision to withdraw and pursue his own work. He duly appointed Janae Radcliffe as the next administrator. The work has continued to this day. And this is from, I don't know when this was posted, but a while back. During this time, the work I continue to this day. At the present time, the college is run by two remaining teachers, Jeannie Radcliffe and Rick Dannenberg. PCA is a nonprofit educational system dedicated to furtherance of the conscious evolution of the individual within the context of their physical existence as it is. To this end, alchemy provides a way that allows us to observe and participate in the process of evolution as we work. By understanding philosophically what is observed consciously through repetitive practical work, the alchemical process is embedded into the psyche to awaken the sleeping beauty within. That which is understood internally becomes that which is observed externally. The two can become one, yet still the vessel remains. The college system consists of 3 levels: laboratory theory and practice to gain insight into universal processes. QBL, I don't know what that is. QBL, is that Kabbalah?
I think it's Kabbalah.
To understand analogical relationships, cycles, and astrologies, to incorporate the principles of time and psychology. Sacred geometry to demonstrate the principles of space and the process of resonant creation. And they got an email. I mean,
right, but this one, according to like the other articles about this particular college in Australia, this one also went under in like 2016 or something. Like recently, they kind of ceased operations. So I don't know what the modern day version of a true alchemical lab would be. And when we say alchemical lab, they have like, here's an example. These images look like it's maybe from like the late 1800s. But they were talking about like right here in 1959 is where Fredo Albertus comes up with the Paracelsus Research Society. And this is where he's teaching alchemy. And I want to say in the foreword, I want to say Mark Stavish sort of makes a nod to Hogwarts here. He mentions it's like a blend of Harry Potter and something else. And that's kind of what I couldn't shake, is that if you go to this Paracelsus Research Society to learn alchemy from Frater Albertus, it's kind of the closest thing that you're going to get to go into a real life Hogwarts. And that if you do magic in your dorm room, the teachers will know about it and they'll get mad at you and like make a big scene in front of the rest of the class. And that for like science fair day, you actually got to show off whether or not you've made a homunculus or do all sorts of like very like, we're not talking about just philosophical, oh, I'm a better person, right? I'm discovering inner gold. They were literally like, okay, bring out your beakers, now heat up your Bunsen burners and show us how you've been able to make this lesser work of herbs. And now I can like pour, mercury or alcohol on this little rock, and the rock will expel some kind of like very potent chemical that was derived from the plant. I don't fully get, like, I understand the whole lesser work thing, but the point being is that this Paracelsus Research Society was not just bookworms. These were like, chemistry nerds that were actually like going all out and making real things in the lab.
So when you're talking about Harry Potter, he's actually referring to, I found the part here, Dr. Frederick Santee of Wallenpen, Pennsylvania is one that comes to mind. A child genius, he was a cross between Doogie Howser and Harry Potter. That was him, and apparently he was a medical doctor, occultist, and practicing warlock in rural Pennsylvania. He was the founder and leader of the Coven of the Kata, a coven that practices Gardenic Wicca, which I've never heard about that, but apparently it's
right. But he's just a Harry Potter meets Doogie Howser, and you should be ashamed you don't know who Doogie Howser is. But it was a different generation. But that Doogie Howser was a TV show about,
never saw it.
A kid that's like 14, but he's
Neil Patrick Harris.
Yeah, it's about Neil Patrick Harris, and he's super smart, and he becomes like a surgeon at 14 or something crazy like that, 16. But he's so smart that he gets through all of his education. So it's actually a good reference to say like the Harry Potter meets Doogie Howser, because Harry Potter wasn't even necessarily Doogie Howser level. He just happened to have some kind of bloodline that made him predisposed to being like a better wizard, I guess, or a warlock. I'm not really. I guess you're a wizard, Harry. So he was a wizard. But also it makes me feel that this Paracelsus Research Society is the Hogwarts in all of this.
I can't unsee this, where he graduated from Harvard as the Magnum Cum Laude when he was 17. Later on to earn 2 PhDs and an MD. But anyways, this was a guy there, right, at the that was involved with the alchemy at the time.
He went to Hogwarts, yeah, and then he became the Harry Potter, meaning that Israel Regardie was no Harry Potter. He was maybe like a Ron Weasley, and then maybe Joseph Lisiewski. I don't know if he's like Hermione, or I don't know who he is. Maybe he's like the kid that was under Snape or something.
So we got that.
Malfoy? He's Malfoy.
Let me talk a little bit about Israel Regardie. So he was Francis Israel Regardie, was an English and American occultist, ceremonial magician, and writer who spent much of his life in the United States. He wrote 15 books on the subject of occultism. Born to a working class Orthodox Jewish family in the East End of London, Regardie and his family soon moved to Washington, D.C. in the United States. Regardie rejected Orthodox Judaism during his teenage years and took an interest in theosophy, Hinduism, Buddhism, and Jewish mysticism. It was through his interest in yoga that he encountered the writings of occultist Aleister Crowley. Contacting Crowley, he was invited to serve as the occultist secretary, necessitating a move to Paris, France in 1928. He followed Crowley to England before their association ended. Living in England, he wrote 2 books on the Kabbalah, A Garden of Pomegranates, and The Tree of Life. In 1934, he then joined Stella Matutina, a ceremonial magic order descended from the defunct Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, but grew dissatisfied with its leadership and left. He also studied psychology, being particularly influenced by the ideas from Jungian psychology, and explored Christian mysticism. In 1937, he returned to the United States, concerned that the Golden Dawn system of ceremonial magic would be lost. He published the Stella Matutina rituals in a series of books between 1938 and 1940. This entailed breaking his oath of secrecy and brought anger from many other occultists. So this is like the controversy behind Israel Regardie exposing the secrets, right? But he did it to preserve the secrets. During the Second World War, he served in the U.S. Army. On returning to the U.S., he gained a doctorate in psychology before relocating to Los Angeles in 1947 and setting up practice as a chiropractor. In 1981, he retired and moved to Sedona, Arizona, where he died of a heart attack 4 years later.
And the note about him setting up practice as a chiropractor in 47, there's a few different points in this book that mention when he asked Regardie about like what he did with his life and how much he cared about all this stuff, that Regardie would constantly be like, I wish I would have just focused more on money, or I wish I would have just had more business and like put all this out, alchemical stuff to the side. But it made a good point too, that yeah, he had a professional business. He was a chiropractor for damn near like 4 decades of his life. And that's where the money came. And without that paying the bills, I don't think he would have had time to just study alchemy, right? I'm pretty sure that that's sort of the leading fucking line here.
Yeah, no, and that is a lot of people. That's even my stance on it. It's like you look into a lot of this stuff as far as occultism and all these things go. And there's a few excerpts that I'll pull up here in a little bit in the book that really touch on the subject of like, hey, you should probably focus on making money, because let me find it here. Yeah, I'll find it in a little bit, but yeah, a lot of the stuff he was saying was true. Like, hey, this is all just, he was kind of poo-pooing alchemy, where it's like it leads to nothing, and it's just an endless cycle of just looking into things, which sometimes I do feel that way about pretty much any subject. Like once you start to look into it, it's like, what's the point? What are we doing here?
Well, even Dr. Frederick Santee, who's the one that was kind of likened to Doogie Howser and Harry Potter. It says right here that if he had to do it all again, Santee said he would forget magic and focus on only making money. As a physician, Santee had a comfortable life, but it's also clear for all his occult skill and talent, in the end, he believed the results did not justify the time and energy he put into it. So that's something that gets repeated not just by Santee, but by Israel Regardie, and I think by proxy too, Dr. Joseph Lisiewski. So all 3 of these guys, which are sort of cited as being like modern, the closest we've got to like master alchemists that their names are popular enough to have gotten out, all of them are saying, don't do alchemy, just focus on making money.
And it's interesting because alchemy throughout all of history has been about essentially unlocking an endless amount of money, because if you could just turn lead into gold and just do that all day long, you could pawn the gold or sell the gold, whatever, and make more money, right? but it never turned out to be the case
I think
because
maybe
you weren't
there's
pure
like
at heart.
there might be a story deeper down under here, right? So if you're John D or some other version and you're hired by the king or royalty, whoever has an unlimited money supply to look into this alchemy thing, like how can we generate endless amounts of gold to therefore I assume to fund like military and expansionism and stuff. But if you're caught in this trap of like I got to just be straight swindling this king for like my whole career is just conning the king, right? Then at a certain point, you got to be like, oh, well, no, deep down, I'm probably purifying my soul. So I'm probably becoming a better person
Sure.
through this process. So I wonder if there's a story like that. Like it started out as being purely physical, and then it had to adopt these like metaphysical and spiritual elements to it just to justify like not getting the results in the physical world.
Sure. Because maybe they realized it was bullshit halfway through and they were like, well, what do we do now? Right. And so
Maybe I'm closer to God. Maybe that's what I can sell.
And that's the way that Lisiewski puts it in the book, where it's about achieving and essentially being able to see the face of God. And by you observing the face of God, you're able to then kind of sort of become one and transcend to that next level, which speaks to the magnum opus and all these ideas of the great work. But it just so happens to be that anyone who ever achieved the great work just happened to disappear. So we can't really ask them like, hey, what's the secrets? Unless you follow anyone before this would probably be Fulcanelli, which even Fulcanelli was one of those, early 1900s, but it's sort of this elusive guy, if he was even a guy or was he a group of people writing together. The first ever mention of Fulcanelli was actually from the wife of, I believe his last name was Bartholdi, which was let me Augustus Bartholdi. Let me fact check myself on that. Yeah, so it was from the wife of Frederick Auguste Bartholdi, who was the sculptor of the Statue of Liberty. His wife was the first one to ever write about the name Fulcanelli, and that's what we're able to trace it back to. And Fulcanelli was probably a group of people, but allegedly in the late 1920s, around there, he appeared in some alchemical lab, or it might have been the 1930s. He appeared in an alchemical lab and revealed the secrets to the scientist about the secrets to essentially nuclear power. And the precursor to the CIA actually went around looking for him. Now, if he was a real person or not, that's up for interpretation. But his description of alchemy is one of the ones that I love the most, because it kind of nails it on the head. Like, hey, what the hell is all this work for in the lab for? Like, what is the Philosopher's Stone? What is all this? And it's like, well, it's to be able to step outside of space and time and manipulate reality from the outside.
If you're pure of heart.
Well, he didn't say anything like that, but he's like, and I'm out and peace out. And then you ever seen that meme with the black kid who does the peace sign and like disappears?
That was Fulcanelli. That was Fulcanelli discovering the Philosopher's Stone.
Yeah, dude, exactly. Peace out. Black kid. Definitely pull that up real quick.
And there's when you're talking about the Philosopher's Stone, this is something that was fairly new to me. I mean, I'd heard this before through Paracelsus' work, but they basically make this claim that in order for you to be able to make a Philosopher's Stone, first you have to be able to make this Herbal Stone, and that an Herbal Stone takes something like 20 pounds of raw dry herb, and then you have to send it through these various processes. And there's like a whole bunch of like encoded stuff in here. So this book, he kind of tells you at the beginning, like, I'm going to give you the exact recipes and everything you're going to need to know.
Doesn't do shit.
You're going to have to like read between the lines in order to get to that super clear message. And one of those messages was that, and this might have been towards the waterworks section, but I kind of applied to the rest of it. But he said that in all of the old manuscripts, if you go up and look at like Valentine or Basil, that some of their writings would say things like, bury this, and I'm going to make something up. It'll be like bury this in horse dung for 30 days and then unbury it. But the problem was that he said that that was a code that really, if you knew what you were looking for and what you were trying to create, you'd have to keep it buried for 9 months, not 1 month. And that anyone that digs it up after a month, they're kind of outing themselves and they're preventing themselves from actually doing this work. And I almost started to apply that same premise to this herbal stones. So the premise of an herbal stone is you take 20 pounds of herb. Let's just say that it's weed, just for like,
that's a lot of herb,
sake.
dude. 20
so
pounds?
20 pounds of weed, and then you basically keep distilling that down until you've got nothing but just the plant matter left over. And I assume that you're saving the points that you're extracting through alcohol, which is called like the mercury. So you're kind of storing all of the concentrated liquid from it, but you're not throwing away the physical plant material at any point either. And what happens is that once you've processed as much as you can, then you start to burn it. And you wait until it turns all black and it just turns into like soot and ash. But then you keep burning it even more and even hotter. And then it starts to turn like a light gray color, and then maybe like a white color, like a completely bleached white color. And then it'll start to form into like a hard substance. And I guess there's a certain point in time when you can roll this into like a ball. And now you've got like this little purified ball of the old like physical matter, and then you start feeding it. And this reminded me of the descriptions on how you would feed a homunculus blood over the course. Like every night you would go and, I don't know, give it like a few drops of blood or something. You do the exact same thing with this herbal stone, that once you've got this perfect little white sphere, then you start feeding it its own blood, which in this case would be its alcohol or its mercury or whatever the liquid substance is that you were able to extract from it before you burnt it, before you calcified it. And then over time, as you feed enough to it, it says that it will take no more, meaning that you've basically like oversaturated this little ball with its own blood. And at that point, it becomes, I guess, this herbal stone, which is the precursor to creating a homunculus. So if you can't make this herbal stone, then they almost make it seem like you've got no chance in making a homunculus.
Yeah, because so the steps of alchemy is, right, you do all the work, you tie the toad down to the swan and all these other things that are symbolic for the process as they illustrate it. But again, it's only to the initiate that is able to pick up on this. But you have to conduct the little work first, the minor work. And when you do the minor work, then you use that to do the great work or the magnum opus. And then allegedly, which the magnum opus is the Philosopher's Stone, right? That's the true what they're trying to achieve. And according even to Full Metal Alchemist, you need, and text that I've read too, you need the Philosopher's Stone in order to create the homunculus, because that's what's going to animate it to life. Similar to how the Philosopher's Stone can turn lead into gold, it can also create life. So you have to sprinkle a little bit of it into the water, I guess, out of the hot dog water or the homunculus water, and then it'll help animate it, because that's the magic of this substance. Like that's how much power it has, that it can literally, and that's truly the premise of alchemy: taking dead matter, dead material, and animating it to life, giving life to inanimate matter and purifying it to its highest form. So that's why you would need, right, the gur, which we're going to be talking about, this primordial, almost like the prima materia, if you will, that you're able to get through the water work, according to Homer and the Golden Chain, which then you grab a supply of that and you stockpile a supply of that gur, that dried gur, and then that's what's going to aid you in the creation of the homunculus. Now, what's interesting is that we've covered the Liber Vacae, right? We've talked about that alchemical process and how that leads you to a homunculus. Maybe that's what the sunstone is, bro. Maybe the sunstone is the Philosopher's Stone or the herbal stone or something, because there's always ingredients that you can't quite pinpoint. But point being is that there are multiple ways to skin a cat, how there are multiple ways to create a homunculus. So you have the 9th century version of the Liber Vacae, which is like, hey, you take a cow carcass, you do all the stuff, You beat it to a pulp with a dog penis, et cetera, et cetera. Boom, 40 days, which is not 9 months, by the way. 40 days, 40 nights. You open it up, you got this blob, and then you put that into the powdered bees and all that, and then it'll grow skin. All that might have been encoded too, bro. Like all that might have been coded. And the reason for that being like, oh, it's to screen out the people who shouldn't be doing the work, right? But
I mean, there's another explanation for this too. That's basically until the 1800s, most people did believe in some form of spontaneous generation of animals. That if you saw
Yes.
like a dead carcass of like an animal out on the road, and then all of a sudden it had maggots in it, like a few days later, that legitimately, like the scientifically accepted theory of that was that life was spontaneously generating from this old animal plant matter into
putrefaction,
new
yeah.
animal plant matter. This is like before germ theory and before they even like really considered microscopic entities doing this. Now, of
Mhm.
course, this is modern history. I think that this is sometime around like 1500s or 1600s, because if you wind the clock back far enough, then you get like Democritus, who was talking about atoms being the smallest possible units of measurement, and that everything that we see in our senses were just opinions and illusions based on these small. So I'm positive that prior to the 1800s or 1600s, there were people that believed in something other than this like spontaneous creation. But for the last 400 years of our current times, this was like the go-to theory. So it wasn't even like if you were sprung up a conversation, you were like, hey man, did you know that those larvae in that carcass over there, like that's just a cycle of life, man? That wasn't you being like stoned or having some deep philosophical thought. That was like conventional science. And it's only
Yes.
been the last 100, maybe 200 years, if you're overly generous, that people are like, oh no, that's not how that works. It works this completely different way. But it also, I think it should humble us, because it's like every 150, 200 years, everything that you know and believe completely changes to something, entirely different. So even now, if we're like, oh, that's so silly, that those idiots thought that larva was just spontaneously being created from like a dead cow carcass, whatever we believe right now in like 150 years is going to sound equally stupid.
Yeah, and then the part that interests me about the homunculus the most is, let's see if I can get this to work or not. Is that might be working, maybe not. Who cares? That it's a possibility, because recently I've seen in the news that they are just coming out with artificial embryos that have no father or mother. So this is quite literally a possibility till this day. And I believe that the stuff that they're showing us in the media is just the tip of the iceberg. I believe that the military industrial complex has had this sort of technology for a while now, and they choose to reveal what they want. And if they're talking about this now, they might have already proven it, and they might have been already doing it for the last 2 or 3 decades already. And it's just like, hey, now let's put it out to the public just to get a feel for it, to see how, let's test the waters out a little bit, right? And see how people feel about it, if there's going to be this ethical debate over it or not. And then like, hey, by the way, here's this person who was growing in one of these labs and they're just fine, and we could probably use them for like labor, cheaper labor, because technically they don't have a soul. There's not, this wasn't created through, and then that's where you get a whole other can of worms, if you will. And that's been one of the main ones recently, as recent as, let me see here, artificial embryos was just revealed not too long ago, actually. So
I mean, but it would still require like the male Mercury, right?
Well, according to this, so researchers create, this is one of the latest ones that I've seen. Let me pull this up. This is one that I've seen recently that people have been sending to me as well. They're like, hey, have you seen this? I'm like, I mean, dude, they're talking about it now. It's been around for a minute. So
Well,
this
I
is
mean,
one of the,
even through Clonate, right? But even like the
Yeah.
that one alien cult, the Raelians, they claim to have made a clone of Eve, or they named Eve in the 90s.
The girl, yeah, yeah, and supposedly it's a healthy girl, but this is one of the main ones. Researchers create mice born from 2 male parents, and let me find the other one that I've had people message me. I actually had a guy
I
message
hear
me like
Donald Trump is also making this illegal now.
So, synthetic human embryos created in groundbreaking advance. So, synthetic human embryos created.
Alchemically, this does make sense. Like, you could have two dads
This
in
is from
alchemy.
2023, bro. This thing that this dude sent me. Oh yeah, we've talked about this before. Synthetic human embryos created. This was more than a year ago. And according to the laws, you can't keep them alive for more than 14 days.
That sounds like a homunculus, man.
Listen, dude, I'm not saying it's a homunculus, but it lines up, right? Like it lines up with creating art. The point of the homunculus is creating artificial life through the use of, alchemy is a spiritual sort of thing, occult, but using science, because alchemy was the precursor to chemistry, which is one of the main branches of science. I would consider it. And here we have these people creating synthetic human embryos, and the reason that they're synthetic is so that they can get around the laws, because technically, yeah, there is laws against using human embryos, but what if that's a copy of a copy? What then? You can get around the ethics of
Yeah, this is like K2 version of an embryo.
Yeah.
Like they just tweak a little molecule here
One
and there, and now
molecule.
it's legal again.
Yeah, and it might make you swarm around the floor like a snake, but hey, you're still gonna get, you're gonna still feel it. But when I see things like this, it solidifies my belief that the homunculus could have been a real thing, maybe once or twice throughout history, right? Because they say, according to Basil Valentine or any of these other guys, that only a certain few throughout the years achieved the magnum opus. So that would make sense that only a certain few, and by a certain few, probably I can think off the top of my head, maybe 3 alchemists that allegedly created the Philosopher's Stone. You got Eugene Consolier and this other guy with Fulcanelli, where they allegedly created the Philosopher's Stone. Fulcanelli disappeared. You have Basil Valentine, who he also disappeared. And if you want to think about Edward Kelly, he allegedly created the Philosopher's Stone, and I mean, he died, but he was imprisoned in a tower for a long time by Rudolph II. But anyway, that's besides the point. Point being that it was only a select few that were able to achieve this.
Well,
So
maybe
what if those?
because one of the things that the Philosopher's Stone is supposed to allow you to do is to live forever. It's supposed to give immortality if you imbibe it, meaning if you like eat on it. And I don't know if you got to eat like a little piece every day or like once a month. I don't know what the actual prescription is, but it seems that if you live forever after eating the Philosopher's Stone, then you couldn't really die, unless again we're just talking about immortality or like a spiritual immortality.
Here's how I've come to understand the Philosopher's Stone, because the Philosopher's Stone, right? They do talk about eating it. They talk about it, that it's sweet, and that you're able, and this is one of the descriptions that Lisiewski gives when he's like feeding the homunculus, that it's very sweet and odor. And we'll jump into that after this. But the Philosopher's Stone, we've come to think of it as an actual stone, but what if it's like a breakthrough of in reality, like space and time? Like, because the way I've come to understand the Philosopher's Stone is that the reaction from the light, once you achieve the Philosopher's Stone, that reaction in that light alters your DNA. So that's when then you're able to step outside. It alters you. You become like this sort of light being. You're able to step outside of space and time. So you wouldn't need to eat the stone if you're already this angelic being that's outside of space and time, manipulating reality. And it's like the Black Kid, like, peace out, I'm out of here, and you can go to another point in time. And yeah, they live forever. Yeah, because it seemed like that, because they're blipping in and out of reality every now and again. Like, it's bringing like the story of Baron Trump and the marvelous underground adventures. Like, hey, he kind of looks like him there. Well, what if again they had access to some sort of technology that allowed them to exist in that time, and then exit in and out. I don't know, through some portal or something into this time. And I don't know, dude. I mean, that's the way
but
I've done it.
if you start with the little work, because I mean, I guess the way that I'm trying to understand this is that the reason you would start with the little work and then make the Philosopher's Stone and then make the Homunculus is because all of these rely on previous disciplines. Like you can
Yes.
only make Philosopher's Stone if you know how to make the lesser work first or the little work. But they also describe the little work that once you make this herbal stone, that it seems like it's just good forever. And one of the claims is that
Reusable.
you can introduce any other herb, and without having to go through the entire process all over again, you can just introduce that herb to your herbal stone, and the herbal stone will do the work for you. It'll extract the essence and the mercury of this new herb that you introduced it to. And I'm just wondering, like, can you pass this down? Like, can I put that on eBay and someone buys it and they use it for 100 years and then their kids put it on eBay and someone else gets it? Like, is there literally no limit to the end of this? And I guess the same thing with a Philosopher's Stone. Like, can you pass the Philosopher's Stone on? Or if it's a portal, right? Does that mean that wherever Edward Kelly opened that portal or wherever he discovered this Philosopher's Stone, is it just waiting for someone else to just turn it back on? Like, is it there forever?
Oof. I love that.
Or does it like die when you die, or does it die when you lose interest with it? Because at least in the book that we read here, this book by Dr. Joseph Lisiewski, it almost implies that it requires some kind of maintenance, which sounds like a lot of extra work. Like if you've already created the thing that can give you immortality, you should be able to hang the rest of it up, right? And just be like, I'm cool, I'm done. This is my retirement plan, is I've got a Philosopher's Stone now.
It might all be bullshit, Thomas. Like that's the
No, I refuse to believe. There's no way that this many men in history would waste this much time on something that wasn't true.
I mean, listen, dude, we talked about the concept of like video games on the phone where you're putting all your time into a video game to get, dude, I put so much time until I got a Herbal Stone, dude. I put so much time into Path of Exile. I got a level 97 Necromancer with the sickest specters that you could ever use in the game. For what? For nothing. And then
it's immortality.
Well, once you pass on, if nobody can log into my account, they can't use it. So I see where you're
pure of heart. That's the problem here, is that you're not pure of heart. So you're not going to actually be able to achieve the true like top level, like level 100.
Okay. All right. That's cool. Yeah. Here we go. So we can buy an alchemically charged stone with alchemical magic and transformation activation for a cool $135. It's on Etsy. We can get it right now. I can buy it.
I actually
right
looked
now.
at a lot of these, man, and I went down like a rabbit hole looking at like Etsy and Amazon items, because there was also a reference that Frater said, we're not giving medical advice here. I just need to preface that. But he was making all these claims that you don't need modern drugs.
Yes.
And then if you just take the essence of these 12 or 13 different like herbal tinctures, each one aligning with a different classical planet,
Your month of birth.
Took these like, for example, like every Monday you got to take one, and every Tuesday you got to take another one, and then it just solved all of his issues. Particularly, he had like these weird gastrointestinal issues with like a stomach. I mean, he did die of colon cancer, I believe. But anyways, like aside from the fact that he died from the thing that he claimed that he had a solution to, but he said that this was like the way. And so I started looking up these particular items on Amazon, and then I was like reading the reviews, and then some people are like, this one's okay, but it doesn't include the monoatomic gold that it needs. So then I went down a rabbit hole of like when you need monoatomic gold added to these, and I was just wondering, is this another one of those read between the lines? Like if you're just an idiot, you go and buy the 13 different tinctures, but if you're smart, you also add the monoatomic gold to your cart, and now you're like a real alchemist. Versus
that's false advertising, man. I don't. That's not cool. I think you should tell the truth from the beginning and let. Right, but yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
A whole bunch of people living forever. That seems like it would lose its novelty.
Sure. Yeah, 100%. And again, you could be absolutely right that it is only for the initiates, and only the initiates know, like, hey, you got to make sure you sprinkle a little bit of that primordial gur in there, and that's what activates the real stuff, and that's when you're able to live forever. But
But
not everybody knows that.
Here we're taught the gur, I think, is only required for
Okay, let's get
homunculus
into it.
and for the philosopher's stone. But wait, before we get into that, do you think that the herbal stone, the little work, do you think that that is possibly like metaphorical? Because in the way that it's described, it sounds like a very real, objective, physical thing that you're making in a lab that has real physical properties.
If we're going solely based off of the book, yes, they made it seem like it was an actual stone that you could put in a desk drawer somewhere and bring it out whenever you wanted. So yes, physical, actual stone thing.
And final point on this too, just to drive this in a little bit, but he made this claim that the guy that Israel Regardie, I believe, said that he made like 3 or 4 of these things eventually. It took him a long time, but that Frater Albertus never made even one. He taught people how to make them, but that he himself was never able to make one.
I think it was Israel Regardie that could never make
Israel
one.
Regardie mentioned that one that he was, or was it Joseph Lisiewski that said that he made 3 or 4 in Israel Regardie. But in the book,
because remember, he
said that Frater never made an herbal stone. But I was just wondering though, because they mentioned that you would have to do this over and over and like show it to the rest of your classmates and prove that you're able to make this thing, and that the people that were able to make it, they would be partnered up with like other lab partners that use the exact same recipe, even down to use the same like glasses and beakers and like the custom glassware, yet they weren't able to make the herbal stone. And
Not
this is
pure
where
heart.
that thing about like you had to be pure of heart, or you had to have already gone through the alchemical process at a spiritual level in order for it to work in the physical level. And I guess that's one of those stipulations that I just can't get over very well, because I feel like if you had the right recipe, you could just tell a robot how to do it. And now the robot's cranking out little work left and right.
Yeah. But a robot doesn't have a soul and it can't be purified, so it's not pure soul, so therefore it would never work. And that's the thing. That's the uncontrolled variable, I guess you could say, where you need to be pure of heart. How do you measure that? How do you measure pureness of heart? I don't know.
Well, it sounds like the test is easy. It's whether or not you can make an herbal stone. So I actually challenge you, Juan, to make an herbal stone. And if you're unable to, it proves that you are not pure of heart.
And that I don't care about the truth, the capital T.
Correct. But
Absolutely.
I mean, the book does tell you to not care about the truth and just care about money.
Yes. And only those who are able to read between the lines will truly extract the information that is being conveyed within this book. So proceed with caution. And again, there's a lot of intricacies, and this book is more of like a journal / it's got a bunch of research papers in there as well. So it's not your traditional book, right?
I like some of the claims he makes, though. I mean, it makes it sound like, be careful, you're going to learn how to make a real homunculus. You're going to learn how to do all of these alchemical. And then he gets very specific on some of the claims where, oh, you have to use like a 6 neutral molecule in this equation. Of course, you would have to know all this. But then on the very next page, he's talking about how someone poo-pooed his ideas. And I've just never seen someone jump from like Philosopher's Stone, like, self-enlightenment, to talking about chemistry, to then talking about poo-poo.
Let's give the people what they want. They want to learn about the water work. The people want to try it out. They want to be at home. They want to collect their rainwater. They want to electrify it.
Yeah, well, let's show the picture again, just so that you know what a master, someone that made 3 or 4 different little works, herbal stones, and then finally this was, I guess this is like intermediary to creating a legit homunculus. That if you do this Hermes golden chain waterwork thing, that it's kind of like a homunculus light. Homer's golden chain.
Hermes.
Hermes and Homer. I mean, who the hell
Homies. Homies golden chain.
Homies golden chain.
Is that what that song was about? Does your chain hang low? Does it wobble to the... Was that?
It was actually about, alchemical work and creating crustaceans out of electrified rainwater, for sure.
Damn. All right. So, that's what we're looking at there. Are you sure that's the right picture?
100%. I'm 100% that this is the photo that they took of this particular crustacean water, where I don't even know if this is a homunculus in the same way. Again, it's like leading into this is like an
It's
invertebrate version of
spontaneous.
a homunculus.
Yeah, it's spontaneous generate. Yeah, I would call it a homunculus slide, I guess you could, because you made it spontaneously through this alchemical process.
This is the K2 homunculus, maybe in a way.
Yeah, yeah, it's not as
But he
cool. I mean,
claims to have made a real homunculus, or at least a portion of a real homunculus that just turned into like a grotesque humanoid, kind of like bloody figure. But his camera was like a little bit
wouldn't
wonky
focus. Yeah,
when, yeah, he just couldn't get it to focus on this thing. It makes sense though. It makes sense that you would spend 4 or 5 decades of your life focused on this one grand experiment, and then once you found success with this grand experiment, you would try to take a couple pictures, see that they were going to be out of focus, and then just give up. That seems like something I would do too.
so I'm gonna walk you guys through what the water work is, and then we'll get into the homunculus. So the analytical technique applied to the water work. In the golden chain of Homer, take a quantity of dew, rain, snow, or hail if you like. But the most expeditious way is if you can take rainwater from a thunder shower, receive it into clean glazed vessels and filter it in order to separate the dirt from it, which intermixes from the roofs of houses and will, after filtration, have a clear, crystalline water of no particular taste. In fact, a fine, clear water fit to be used like any other fine water. Place this collected water in a warm garret where neither the sun nor moon can shine upon it. Cover the vessels with a linen cloth to prevent the dust from getting into it. Let it stand a month unmoved. And if the place is warm enough, you will by this time perceive an alteration in the water, because this water begins by the power of the implanted spirit to grow warm, although imperceptibly, and to break. It begins to ferment and putrefy and acquire a bad smell. And you will observe that it becomes turbid, although it was perfectly clear at first. And a brown, spongy earth ascends swimming at the top, which increases daily, and from its weight falls to the bottom. So this is essentially taking water, putrefying it in this soapy, foamy thing at the top. Here you see a separation occasioned by the ingrafted spirit of the gross from the subtle. The separated earth is brown, spongy, or like wool, slimy and slippery, and this slimy earth is the universal gur of nature. And that's what we're looking for. Okay, the gur, the pre-Adamic earth, is the base material from which the 3 kingdoms of nature, i.e., the mineral, vegetable, and animal, are created. Okay, so that's what we're looking for. This gur that comes from essentially this electrified rainwater, and if you let it sit, in some places I saw 125 gallons, and another time he said 200 gallons. I don't know. And then if you have acid rain, then you have to distill it and then re-electrify it. You have to get a certain pH. So it can get a little wonky, especially if you try it modern day because of all the pollution and everything that's in the air. So
Well, he claimed that a simple Van de Graaff machine could
Yes.
help purify it in a way, which I just found interesting, because maybe when in the early 1980s, when he was doing this work, a Van de Graaff might have been fairly novel and like hard to get a hold of. But you can go on Amazon and get a Van de Graaff machine right now for like $60.
for $60, you're that much closer to creating a homunculus and proving everybody right. So here he gets into, in the Golden Chain of Homer, it talked about you can collect it from the roofs, but then if on today's standards, there's a lot of buildings that are grounded. So, if it touches your roof, it's going to get decharged. So that wouldn't work. So hence the water collected from such structures retained its electrical charge and was suitable for this experiment in that time period. So make sure that you don't get it from your rooftop because it can get contaminated. As a consequence, rainwater collected from buildings in present day would lack the critical electric charge component, yada, yada, yada. So then he gets here, or he tells you, if a murky reddish brown substance remains in the distillation flask, the presence of acid rain can be suspected, requiring all the rainwater to be distilled prior to putrefaction. In this way, a contaminant-free gur can be assured. So If you have contaminated gur, it's not going to work. So if your neighbors are watching you constantly boil this water that you collected in your backyard over and over again, they might not know about this process, but just let them know that you're about to make a homunculus with contaminant-free gur. Okay, so he gets into the whole thing, right? The Van de Graaff generator to charge the water. So the steps are water collection. Here we have 125 gallons. I've seen 200, so we don't know. The next step is putrefaction. Once you make sure that 125 gallons of water is uncontaminated, you have to let it putrefy, and that's when you're going to get this little gur. And then you have the electrification if you have to re-electrify it. And then the gur production. So 125 gallons of distilled and electrified rainwater was placed in 10 plastic food-grade containers, each with a capacity of 15 gallons. 2 controls were established. So then he did like these controlled experiments. Like he got some from the roof of the house that was not filtered, that was filtered but not electrified. And then he did another one that it was filtered and electrified, right? So he's like trying to find it here. He tells you the controls 75 to 85 degrees for 90 days. And then he talks about his conclusions. The 10 containers which had been distilled and electrified showed a 39% per container higher yield of gur when compared to control 2, and a 51% higher yield per container when compared to control 1. So if you collect the 10 gallons from the roof that was filtered and electrified, you get 51% more yield. So purification is key. Filtration is key. Make sure that whenever you're taking this water, it's as pure as can be, and gotta make sure it's electrified. So he did a total of 37 experiments over a 3-year period. Okay. And he only succeeded on the 35th, 36th, and 37th experiment.
And then he stopped.
And then he stopped.
That's the wildest part to me, that if I did something 40 times and it only worked the last 3 times, that I would just do it those last 3 and then be like, all right, I guess I've learned everything there is to learn here. It's time to, and I never fixed my camera with the out of focus lens.
So that's the water work. Now, according to this, and according to Frater Albertus, you need the gur. You need a substantial amount of gur, which will give you the exact amount here. And with that gur is what you are presenting in the homunculus experiment in order to bring forth the homunculus. Now here he gets into the background of the homunculus and why the idea came to be, right? The preformationism that all of sperm essentially was a little man first, and then it was like the things that remember as a kid, those things that you would put in the water that would grow bigger.
Not shrimp brine.
No, those are sea monkeys. That's different. Those are the things that you put into water and there's like actual little organisms. I'm talking about the little colorified animals that you would put into water and they would grow bigger.
Oh, the little like sponges in the pills.
Yeah, that's how people viewed preformationism. Essentially, it was a little, we all exist as little forms first and then we grow into the big forms. Okay. Now, here he talks about what you were mentioning earlier, that some of the things in Paracelsus' work, the Natura Rerum, which essentially is the first time ever where the term homunculus is used, that's maybe some of he was either skipping steps or putting in wrong steps in order to keep people out of it. And this he gets into this whole thing here, and that the acronym of like what was that, all these other things, and the water, was that the sperm, like all these he was reading it over and over and over again, trying to extract the true knowledge of what the hell, how to make it, right? So he talks about this other method here, where this dude was taking an egg laid by a black hen, punched a tiny hole in it, and inserted his semen in the first day of the lunar March cycle. According to the guy, a miniature humanoid figure would emerge from the egg after 30 days. He talks about the mandrake and how you could infuse that and make it into a homunculus. So he's talking about the basic, homunculus type of thing. And then he talks about a friend of a friend in the Golden Dawn that allegedly had a actual homunculus and that he saw a picture of it. Of course, he doesn't include the picture, but let's read that here real quick. I detected frustration, et cetera, et cetera. So I believe he was talking to Regardie and why Regardie was interested in this homunculus work. So I detected his frustration at not being able to engage in such experimental work himself. And at the same time, his desire to be filled in on every part of the process, if indeed it could be done at all. I got the very distinct impression he was trying to relate the idea of the homunculus to some type of closely guarded magical work. And so asked him if this was the reason for his interest and the feelings I detected from him during our lengthy discussions on the issue. In a very thoughtful way, as if being careful of what he said and the manner in which he said it, he replied, well, there is something, or rather there was, but it was a long time ago when I was in the Golden Dawn. To be frank, my memory fails me on a lot of things these days, of course, especially from so long ago. But as I recall, I heard of one fellow who claimed to have made it, the homunculus, and who was working to raise it properly back then. This was back in London. He was a friend of one of our order members. So he was a friend of a friend, but refused to join the order itself. He said he didn't trust the chief or the adepts of the order and so wanted to have none of it.
Why would
But
you even need to? If you're already making a homunculus, why do you need to join a club?
100%. You don't need those people. You already figured it out. You don't need that shit. So, but as I said, he was a friend of one of our group, and so the two discussed it closely, or so I was told. But that wasn't all. You know how rumors are bound in this business. So when I heard about it from the other order member, I didn't think too much about it at the time, except to find it fascinating. Frankly, though, I don't think I really believed any of it. But then I was shown a photograph of it, one taken by its maker. There was a yardstick directly behind the thing, and it was only about 10 inches tall. But I have to tell you, it looked like a well-formed, perfect miniature human. It didn't look like any fake or a doll or anything like that. No, it was so real. I felt that if I reached out and touched the photo, I'd feel living flesh. You could see life in its eyes. Like I said, it was no fake. Everything about it was correct. It was so well proportioned, the head and fingers especially. Those tiny fingers looked just perfect at the right length and so well fitted to that peewee hand. Fascinating.
Dude,
So
props to this guy that was trolling his friend and his friend's whole little like Golden Order lodge by like making like a really convincing looking fake photo and just being like, look, bro, no one could fake this. Look, it's a photo. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And everyone was just like, oh my God, this guy knew how to make a homunculus.
Well, if we go back to that time, this is probably the, I don't know, early to mid 1900s, you couldn't do Photoshop. I mean, I'm sure you could fake something, but hey, he was a friend of a friend. Never saw it, except I saw the photo, and that's what it looked like. So,
what resolution was this photo? Are we talking like a 12K digital photo here?
We don't know.
Or was it like a
Polaroid?
Daguerreotype?
I don't know. This is the story. This is how it goes. This is why Regardie was so interested in the concept. Since that day, I kept this memory to myself, mostly because it was so strange and had gotten myself in enough trouble by releasing the Golden Dawn material. But what I was really intrigued with was the fact that this fellow said there were magical techniques he was using to raise and train it. Of course, this really pulled me in, but I never heard about it or saw any more photos after that, as I left the order a few months later. This is why I'm interested. Is such a thing possible? And if it is, does magic have any role in its upbringing? Really, about the closest I ever got to this subject was the magical child right we discussed so many years ago and the paper I gave you on it. Now, this is talking about this allegedly paper that I'm sure we can't find online that Regardie gave to Lisiewski about this magical child. And that whenever he was
child, like almost literally a moon child.
Yeah, and that whenever he was so now that you're on the verge of actually attempting this thing, well, you can see why I'm so interested. So then again, he had given him a paper on how to raise this magical child. et cetera, et
Well,
cetera.
I think there was funny context because the context of him giving this paper on the magical child is that Lisiewski at a couple parts in this book are like, I've got a wife, but we decide not to have a kid
Yeah.
because there's just no time for the kid with all of this like important lab work and all of my professional life. Yet this guy spends 40 years trying to make like a homunculus, and then I think at a certain point Israel Regardie is like, look, dude, like you've spent 4 decades in the lab with a bunch of other dudes. Why don't you just go and have a kid with your wife and just do one of these? Like, I almost feel that he was nudging him along. Like he knew that it wasn't a moon child or a magical child. He was like, bro, like you can't keep saying that you're too busy. Like just go and take care of business.
So now we step into a conversation between Lisiewski and Frater Albertus. And the conspiracy was that Frater Albertus was pushing Lisiewski to do it because of his moral compass, and that he had, at one point, according to Regardie, achieved the work and got far enough but couldn't finish it because of his moral views. Okay, so now this is a conversation between Frater Albertus and Lisiewski, where he calls him up on the phone and he's like, hey, he agreed and asked me to telephone him that Sunday evening for, quote, what will be a long and hard discussion. It is time you begin the work. Just make certain you have enough of the girl left. The rest you can take care easily enough. So this is before the call that they had where he breaks everything down for Lisiewski and tells him exactly what he's got to do, how he's got to do it. Okay. So okay.
This is basically him just telling him how he needs to bang his wife.
Yeah. So I contemplated his remaining counsel on the matter. Regardless of these conditions, the creature yet exists, and it only remains for an alchemist but to bring him up a process that is no more difficult than which was used to generate him. This raising process, and he's talking about Paracelsus here. This raising process may be accomplished by feeding the creature daily over a period of 40 weeks with the acronym of human blood. But yet throughout this time, the forming creature must not be removed from the dunghill in which he was formed. At the end of this time, there will be a living child having every member as well as proportion as any infant born of a human woman. And he will be smaller and more frail than a normal human child, though, and will require more care and attention in his education, with physical education being stressed. So he's talking about Paracelsus. And then he's contemplating, he's like, what does all this mean? Somewhere in all of this, it all came together. So he had a breakthrough. For now, I saw the process of separation had been invoked during the putrefaction of the rainwater, which had produced gur, and the combination would occur when the male sperm, my sperm, would impregnate the mother gur. So the concept is you have this primordial substance, right? And you have to introduce to it the living water while still warm.
Well, he describes it too, that the gur and Mother Earth is the salt. So the same way that you were making the herbal stone, where the stone itself was the salt, and then you had to put the mercury onto the salt. This is now him saying like, okay, well now since the gur is the salt, now the male, the human being is the mercury or produces the mercury. And that was the other way that he kind of described this alchemical equation.
Yes. So Albertus calls him, and during that night telephone conversation, he probably announced to Frater Albertus the sum and substance of his thesis. To my absolute delight, he confirmed it completely. I informed him I had 17 grams of gur left after performing all of the water work, and that I prayed this quantity would be sufficient for starting this work. So this is where everyone take notes. He explained to me that only 4 grams would be needed. So the water work that we explained earlier, make sure you have at least 4 grams of that. And that's all you're going to need. And you can save the rest for like more homunculus down the road.
Of the gur, 4 grams of the gur.
4 grams of the gur, yes, which you have to dry, and then, you kind of keep it in like a powdered form, I guess you would say. I don't know. So he explained to me that only 4 grams would be needed and that I should save the rest for future trials. It will not be easy, he cautioned. You will most likely suffer several false starts until you get the hang of it, particularly with properly supplying the growing fetus with the acronym of blood and air. So this is the other important part you have to take into consideration. Make sure you eat a healthy diet, that you're pure of heart, and we'll explain the rest. For the rate at which blood flow is regulated is crucial, as is the fact that the blood must come from you and from no one else. You are the father and must extend yourself in the mechanical procedures of nurturing by controlling the rate of blood flow to the fetus, just as the girl will nurture by doing her part constantly throughout the gestation period. Controlling the airflow will not be difficult, as you will see, but controlling the blood flow, there is the rub. Yet you can do it with great care and diligence. So again, the airflow to the fetus, not going to be your problem here. Okay, your problem is going to be controlling the flow of blood that needs to come from you. Okay, and you have to do this for.
When I'm reading this, I'm just thinking like the dude's just having a hard time jerking off, and that's when he's talking about the blood flow and the pure thought. Like, because think about it, how hard would it be to inseminate dirt if all you had were pure thoughts? You had to be absolutely pure. So like you don't even have any material in the bank to conjure up because you've been so pure your entire life. So of course you're worried about blood flow at this very important moment at the end.
So the blood flow is very important. The airflow, let me just move my screens around here a little bit. So we discussed the details of the experiment, including the design of the vessel that would serve as the womb for the creature. It was not so much a difficult design as was the process behind its correct use. For as Frater explained to me, the apparatus is not large. In fact, it stands no larger than 6 inches, has 2 side arms for controlled airflow, and another side arm for the injection of the acronym, which is only 3 inches in diameter. It must be placed in a dunghill, as you correctly surmise, a sand bath, and buried halfway up the vessel and left there undisturbed for 9 months. So again, you don't have to use a dunghill. You can get a sand bath, which you can probably buy on eBay or Amazon for cheap. And a sand bath is like this plate that you put on it, and it stays warm, right? So you have to keep it at 98.6 degrees. So take notes, everyone. 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit, the temperature of the human body. Okay.
Does this imply that at some point in history, horse dung and cow dung stayed at 98 degrees for more than a few hours? Because it would almost seem that if you've got horse dung, or were they like constantly replacing the dung with fresh dung?
You fell for it, Thomas. You fell for one of the traps because you're not supposed to use a dunghill. You're supposed to use something else. You're supposed to use an alchemical furnace or something to keep the correct temperature. This is why alchemy is all about mastering the flame and the temperature of the flame, which is something that Israel Regardie couldn't figure out on how to use the furnace that Lisiewski had constructed, and he couldn't figure out how to make the 7 tinctures because he couldn't control the temperature. And this is why they call alchemy the religion of fire, because you need to master the fire and master the temperatures. So you fell for Paracelsus's occult blind by keeping it in the dunghill. You were never going to succeed, Thomas.
He was a tricky guy.
He was a tricky guy, absolutely. So you have to keep it there undisturbed for 9 months. That is the only part of the process that is incorrect. I suspect Paracelsus and others who did this work purposely gave the wrong figure here to stop the idle curious from attempting this work. So we unveiled the truth here on the Occult Book Club by telling you the truth of what you're supposed to do. Okay.
And I'm expecting some like viewer submitted videos and pictures of whenever you jerk off into the dirt and you let it sit in a sand bath for 9 months. Send us a picture of what it looks like afterwards.
It's got to be in the gur though. You can't just jerk off onto sand and expect.
Right. Well, I mean, I'm being like Paracelsus
Don't be
right
so
now. I'm
crude,
trying to,
Thomas.
I'm trying to bear. Well, I'm using dung instead of sand bath.
Enough with the homoerotic stuff. All right, let's get down to business, because in fact, I suspect that this is why Paracelsus states the creature has no body and will be transparent or invisible for 40 days, yet must still be worked with. This is a ruse. This is all a trick. This is all a facade. We figured it out. It takes every bit of 9 months to create the creature, as you were about to find out, right? So he tells them about, provide just enough air movement to allow for refreshing air in the womb without disturbing the fetus. The rate of air flow should be no more than 2 feet per minute, so the forming fetus is not disturbed, but it's still aerated. So take notes, everyone. No more than 2 feet per minute air rate. Okay, and you're gonna get a beaker with 2 inlets. Okay, you're gonna get a sand bath, 98.6 degrees, and this is all after you do the water work and you collect at least 4 grams of gur. Okay, so you'll be able to tell the aeration is proceeding at the proper rate when small little lazy ripples appear and move across the surface of the gur sperm combination. Also make certain that both the rubber tube vents remain open during the breathing cycle. This allows the easy passage of airflow through the vessel over the fetus and out the exhaust port. This has to be done every 72 hours, no more, no less. Okay, so you need to aerate this thing every 72. Are you guys writing this down? Every 72 hours, no more, no less. Okay, at a rate of 2 feet per minute. Yeah, we're cooking with gas here. There is something else, says Albertus. There's a great danger that the developing fetus will be contaminated with bacteria from the outside during the aeration process. Each of the rubber tube vents or side arms on both sides of the vessel must be fitted with a ball airlock, the kind you use when fermenting your herbs for the herbal stone. So again, you've already had this equipment, so make sure you take the ball airlock and you put them on the tubes that are coming out of this vessel. You have to use it because even though you aerate the fetus every 3 days, the vents must remain open to the air at all times during the 9-month gestation process. Gases will be evolved by the fetus during its development, and you will have to vent the vessel without letting any contaminants in. And be certain you use potassium bisulfite in the ball locks to kill any bacteria or mold that might enter through the open end of the locks. So sterility must be assured. So get some potassium bisulfite. Make sure you have some of that. I'm sure you can find that on Amazon as well. And right here is where he talks about the amount of acronym you have to put in to it. So my concerns were now with the regulating blood flow. So I impatiently interjected, how is the flow of the acronym regulated? How often is it supplied to the fetus? Make sure you guys write this down. It is difficult. You will have to determine the exact rate for your case yourself. As a general guideline only, you will use the third side arm of the vessel for adding the acronym. Okay, so I guess there's 3 arms on this thing instead of 2. So
he mentioned that a lot of these experiments required custom glasswork, that you couldn't just go and buy like a regular Pelican beaker, for example, that you might have to make your own for a lot of this.
It's doable. We can do this. Okay, so I guess there's a third side arm of the vessel for adding the acronym. Add it with a hypodermic syringe. So you're going to need a hypodermic syringe, 100 milliliters at a time. This will have to be done every 3 to 7 days. You will have to determine that for yourself. Okay. So let's recap here. You need a vessel with 3 arms. You need the ball locks. You need to be able to sterilize the ball locks. And you're going to feed it your blood, 100 milliliters at a time, every 3 to 7 days. But you're gonna have to play it by ear a little bit. Okay, your homunculus might require more. Depends on your diet, depends on all your health and all that stuff. So you're just gonna have to figure it out. Excess blood will begin to pool at the top of the gur. When that occurs, stop. Don't put any more blood. Okay, if you put too much, it's gonna start to pool at the top. When all the pool blood, when all of the pool acronym has disappeared and the surface of the gur begins to take on a dry appearance, more must be added. So you got to keep it kind of moist. Okay, you got to keep this little ball kind of moist. All right, but be careful. It is possible to add too much or add it too quickly, at which time the fetus will literally drown in the acronym that is in the very life of which the blood is the only vehicle. Life of which the blood is the only vehicle as you were taught in class. Right. So again, if you didn't go to the Paracelsus Research Society, don't worry about any of that. Like, it's fine. We got you here. Just make sure you take these notes and report back to Thomas and I. Okay, shoot us an email. Report back.
There's no excuse for anyone to not make a homunculus now that the entire recipe is laid out for you. There is no reason for you to not be doing this already.
Exactly. All right, you better get on it as soon as you finish this episode. So
I've got one. I have one that I've been working on. It's about 8 months along. I was trying to show my this is the stupidest thing. My camera won't go into focus. Every time I try and show it to you, the camera like keeps zooming in and out and it won't focus on it. As soon as I fix my camera, I'll show you a picture of it. I'll do a full live stream, everything. I'll show you it eating the blood. It's just stupid camera. The stupid camera.
Next episode, dude. It's fine. I understand. Next episode, where we have to be pure heart for this stuff. So here's where the experiments in life and death, and this is Lisiewski journaling his days creating this homunculus. Okay. But as we will see, he didn't see it all the way through. So day one, beginning of the experiment, the girl was sterilized using a standard electron bombardment technique. Don't worry about this, guys. You know, you only need 50. So this time, not at 50,000 volts at 25 microamps, was using the generation of animals, but 12,000 volts at 12 milliamps. Okay. Bombardment, 6 hours. The vessel was also sterilized using 12,000 volts of AC. Exposure time, 6 hours. So the GUR is going to be sterilized for 6 hours at 12,000 volts, 12 milliamps. And then the vessel, 6 hours at 12,000.
That math checks out. I double checked all this math. That does actually equal out.
Okay, just making sure. And my own fresh sperm to impregnate the GUR and the vessel, sealed and placed in a sand bath at 98.6 degrees. So you take the GUR after you're done sterilizing it. You take the sperm and you put it in the sand bath at 98.
I hate to be a stickler here, but he never specifies the amount of sperm needed because I mean, I assume like some people are producers and some people might just, produce just like a tiny little bit.
One shot.
Right, but I mean, even a shot, bro. A shot is different, depending. Anyways, this was one of those other like read between the lines. Like if you're pure of heart,
you can't reveal all the
how much
secrets
you're making here.
Yeah, you can't reveal all the secrets. You know what I'm saying? You're gonna have to play it by ear again. So if you need more, just make sure you add more. Just day 10. The girl was fed twice already and aerated twice as well, both times on days 4 and 8. Frater was right. The grayish mass absorbs the acronym at such a rate I could hardly believe my eyes. There is no distinguishable features in the GUR yet. I suppose I expect to see something like an embryo, but with this work I am not sure. Certainly Frater was no help at all when I asked him this question. He would not give me a straight answer there except to laugh and tell me, when you see what you see, you will tell me. Then you will join me in my knowledge, and this work will be carried on to the next generation, whatever the hell that means. All I see is a grayish
lines, bro.
You gotta be pure heart. All I see is a grayish mass lying on the bottom of the womb and nothing more, except that the blood is absorbed by the mass and the air is removed through the evacuation sidearm of the vessel. Has a very distinct sweet odor, like the fragrance that arises from a field of flowers in the spring. It certainly has not decayed as in the 3 previous experiments, and is at least something curious. So I guess he failed 3 other times before this particular one that we're on right now. So day 30, something is happening. 6 days ago, I gave another feeding and aeration. The odor coming from the vessel during the evacuation of the aeration is so sweet as to be overpowering. So if you're getting the sweet smell, you know you're on the right track. If you get the smell of death, start over. Okay? Don't continue to already.
Or is that what he wants you to think?
You might be right. Might be right. Only one way to find out. So
like if you come and you smell death, maybe you're on the right track.
Every step of the way, guys, make sure you email us a day, every few days, and show us your findings, and make sure just to check in with us. Okay. So it is, to my sense, sickeningly sweet, but that is not all. That is not all. Using a bright light and a magnifying glass, I saw what appeared to be tiny red lines in the GUR, markings, if you will, the type one sees on a map, the details of which are taken by a satellite from space. It also appears that the grayish mass is turning a deeper gray in color, and that a black spot the size of a very small pea has appeared near the top of the mass that is facing east in the sand bath. I have my opinions, or rather ideas here, but don't want to prejudice my own mind with some fanciful misgivings. Time alone will tell. So 15 days later, there is no question about it. The tiny red lines have become bigger. To me, they look like capillaries. The now dark grayish mass has also taken on a shape. To me, it resembles a small curled up fetus. I cannot see any hands or appendages of any kind, so simply note this. Additionally, the black pea-like structure has grown larger and more distinct. So, what do you say is as big as a pea? Is that how we're the size of a very small pea? Grayish mass turning deeper. Yeah, that's not very big.
I imagine it's like when you crack open one of those eggs, and like the egg might have been like not like, you know, it was almost fertilized, and it has like the little chunk of like a blood speck in it. I kind of imagine that's what he's describing here.
Sure. So, additionally, the black pea-like structure has grown larger and more. Is a very glossy appearance, and it is fixed in its position. The gird appears to be an eye during its early formative stages. This is, I remember such things from my undergraduate zoology and biology classes. The amount of the acronym required has also increased. Until I see more progress, I will continue to call the grayish mass just that, a grayish mass. Having stated that the grayish mass required the administration of 170 milliliters of blood every 5 days, an increase. So that's quite a bit more than what he was saying here.
He said 100 originally.
103 to 7. He's doing 170 every 5 days.
Do you think this is a humble brag? He's like, if you just make like a normal homunculus, it might drink 100 milliliters of blood. But if it's like one of my super homuncs, like these puppies are hungry. These are 170.
Yeah, this is a 170.
This is outside of your weight class.
As always, the blood simply disappears into the mass. After 4 days, the outside edges of the mass begin to dry out, but only lightly. But the 5th day, there is a gentle dry appearance on the surface of the mass. At this time, I add further arcanum. I've been saying it wrong. So acronym arcanum. Thus, I have the process of aeration, or breathing, as Frater has termed the process, down, as well as the proper time between feedings. At least for now. For certainly, as this mass grows, if it does grow any further, I expect the times between aerations and feedings to decrease. My only concern is that I will be able to supply enough of the arcanum to keep the experiment going. So he's kind of doubting his abilities here to supply this thing with enough of his blood, right? Because he's kind of, he's getting kind of old, kind of frail. Got to keep up. Make sure you stay hydrated. Drink a lot of electrolytes and everything. Have good, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And just make sure to keep it up. So day 60. There can be no doubt about it. The red markings are capillaries. They're transparent, being given away by concentrations of blood in them at different points as the arcanum courses through them. Additionally, the pea-like object has lost its glossy color. It is now flat black in appearance and has grown larger. I estimate it is now the size of a large pea or even a small bean. But there is something else as well. The dark grayish mass has definitely increased in size over the past 10 days. I estimate it has increased its size by 30%. The amount of blood required during feedings, however, has remained the same. So 100 milliliters every 5 days, aeration every 4 days. Day 90. There is so much condensation inside the vessel, I cannot be sure about what I'm seeing. No doubt the water content of the semen and the sperm has given rise to this fog. Up until 5 days ago, this condensation has remained on the bottom 1/3 of the vessel, not anymore. The entire womb is so fogged up I can't tell what's happening with any certainty. Aeration and feedings have been going on as normal. I trust the feeding time, since the girth still dries out over its surface, or seems to, as best I could visually determine, just as before, although I can't see the surface of the girth mass very clearly due to the condensation. Frater told me to just continue with things as usual. He said the condensate should clear up shortly, and then I, quote, would see something wonderful, unquote, we shall see.
Dude, this part was a little bit crazy to me, and I swear I'm not just trying to be crass about it, but he says that he attributes the condensation to the semen that he added to it, like over a month ago at this point, yet he's been introducing 100 to 170 milliliters of blood every single day, yet he thinks it's the moisture from his semen from over a month ago that's still providing all of the condensation and moisture in this entire environment. I don't get that part of it unless he's also introducing more semen like every day along with the feedings of blood.
And it's making me think that the gur is the muddy water at the top that you skim off, because you need at least, but then 4 grams. Would you measure water in gram? Would you say like milliliters? Like, there's still a lot that we don't. It's not, these instructions aren't very clear. We're gonna have to
mine works. Mine's working over. Oh, my camera. Oh, no, my camera just stopped working again.
Oh, well, we'll figure it out for the next stream, dude. So you can show us the homunculus. So day 120, the condensation cleared up 15 days ago, and it is now obvious that the mass has taken on the shape of a crescent. Although the points of the crescent at the top and bottom are rounded, somewhat more like a distinct fetus. There seems to be some pulsing in it, but I can't be sure. It's just too dark in the vessel, and the added light I use only causes greater glare when trying to make out such delicate vertical movements. So of course, you can't really see what's going on with the glare.
At first it was the camera, now it's a lighting issue. I get it.
Yeah. But there is something else also. I couldn't believe my eyes, but Frater told me it was the something wonderful he told me about last month. There are 2 tiny appendage-like projections near the center of the mass, and at the ends of them, what looks to be even tinier small humps or bumps. These are, quote, arms and hands. Those humps or bumps, as you call them, are miniature fingers, he explained. Aeration periods remain the same, but the feeding time has increased, while the amount of the arcanum, whatever, used to feed it has decreased. Now, only 130 milliliters of arcanum is administered every 7 days. So guys, adjust for the size of your homunculus. You're going to learn the ways as you go, okay? It's a good thing too. It's getting difficult supplying the life so often. My diet has changed to include mostly red meats, and I started taking mega vitamins to keep up with the demand. Still, I feel fine. I think my concern is more of a psychological matter than it is a physical one. So again, you also have to psychologically prepare yourself for this, because you're essentially growing a homunculus, which is a huge undertaking.
And plus, like, your wife's asking you, like, what are you doing in that shed back there today, hon? And you're just like, I'm busy.
I'm jerking off into jars again, damn it. Leave me alone.
I like too that he's kind of by proxy feeding his homunculus Centrum Silver.
Yeah. Well, one a day men's. He's feeding it as well, so it's gonna get have all the multivitamins and everything. So day 150. All right, we're almost there. Great progress has been made. There is no cloudiness or condensate in the vessel whatsoever, and the dark grayish mass has turned a light gray, making it fairly easy to see what is going on in the vessel when a strong light is used. Clearly, the appendages are miniature arms, and the ends possess finger-like growths. The eye has a film over it, much like an actual eyelid, and there is a pulsating up and down in motion. Here we go. I've tried to take photographs of the creature using my German Pratatica. We're going to look this up to 35 millimeter camera outfit, but I cannot get the resolution I need. Even the PL3 close-up lens cannot resolve what is going on down at the bottom of the vessel. At least I have the hand drawings I made. That will have to be enough. I don't think we ever found the hand drawings, right?
No, I mean, we've got an actual photograph of the waterwork. So yeah, I wouldn't trust a hand-drawn image.
Okay, so I see the kind of camera he used. It's like an old school kind of sort of that with a 35 millimeter lens. So, I mean, he could have taken a picture of the setup, right? He could have at least been able to tell what was going on. But I guess we'll never know. But again, the people listening now, they're gonna try, and they're gonna send us pictures. So that's all that really matters.
Yeah, just don't use the Practica
35 millimeter,
35 millimeter.
Or the PL3 close-up lens, yeah, because you're not going to get a good picture. Just use your iPhone. So aeration has continued according to schedule, and the administration of arcanum has also dropped over the last 30 days. Now only 90 milliliters of blood is required, and still only every 7 days. It is strange, though. The mass has increased approximately 50% over and above the earlier 30% increase, yet less blood is required. Frater told me, you have to remember that there has not been enough work done in this area, so we don't know if this is normal or not, but continue on as best you can. This seems to be an about face for him. My interpretation is that he took this experiment only so far as Regardie speculated and had to abort it, no pun intended. That's why he can no longer guide me on what is happening in my experiment. As far as I am concerned, I am I am on my own now and just have to feel my way as I go. Nevertheless, in my opinion, things are looking up. Awesome. Keep up the great work, if you will. Day 180. Something is wrong. Everything has changed over the past 6 days. The mass I refer to as a creature at the bottom of the vessel has turned a very dark gray, a brownish color appearing in the rim of the crescent. There is only slight pulsation as well, and the eye, as I can make it out through its lid, seems smaller. I continue the aeration as usual, and on day 5 of the day 6, I notice something amiss. I increased the supply of arcanum back up to 130 milliliters. I will continue this every 5 days using both fresh and stored blood. Oh, dude.
Taking shortcuts.
That's where you messed up, dude. Using both fresh and stored blood I saved from earlier blood draws. It just feels right at this point because the thing may truly be starving. I don't know what else to do, hence my decision to increase the food supply. All of it has been absorbed by the thing, however, the color change disturbs me. I think it is dying. Perhaps the increased quantity of arcanum, and the decreased time between feedings will bring it back to health. So, day 220. Now, I think in a 9-month period, there's like 274 days. Is that how many days in 9 months? That is
270 roughly, right?
273. So close. So technically this thing died on day 218. He didn't really make it, that far. He still had a ways to go. The experiment has ended. The thing died 2 days ago. I have not been able to face this failure, especially when I consider how much I gave to it in terms of everything that was required. Even though I continued to aerate as usual and feed it every 5 days, it was not enough. 2 days ago, when I started to aerate, the odor of death emerged from the exhaust item of the vessel. The stench of death is unmistakable, and heaven knows I've smelled it so many times in my life that there was no doubt of it. When examined with a bright light, the crescent-shaped mass was very dark brown, almost black, motionless, and lacked any and all definition. The arms, fingers, and eye had disappeared, being returned to the gur. I tried adding more arcanum immediately and sat with the experiment for 38 hours continuously, trying to monitor the rate of blood flow so as not to kill it by feeding it too fast, if indeed it was not already dead. Aeration was also increased as a last effort to revive what I had created. But it all failed. When I removed the vessel from the sand bath and opened it, the stench of death was so powerful that I jumped back. It was the most powerful death smell I ever experienced. I could not bring myself to clean the vessel by discarding the thing as though it was a piece of garbage. As strange as it is to write this, I felt and still do a great emotional attachment to the little thing and cried when I realized it died. I feel I loved it in some way. I buried the vessel with the creature in the woods and retreated to my laboratory until today. I feel so badly the poor thing had to die and die the way it did. It never had a chance at life in the world, and I am beyond grief in knowing this. I don't think I will ever forgive myself for not being able to give it a life it deserved. When I called Frater a few hours ago and told him what happened, he too felt very sad and expressed such to me. In his words, many would fault us for what we have done, but all this is God's plan for mankind, and the whole, this work has its place too. We could have learned so much and become so much closer to the Creator if we could have succeeded in this grand experiment. I felt the same too. Both of us were choked up. We had to end the telephone call abruptly. I'll have to contact Regardie as soon as I am able and explain what happened to my creation. I have no idea how he will take it, and frankly, I don't give a damn.
You can see that he's like going through some things because he just lost his little guy, right? He just like lost his son to this. Now, I don't want to just rub more alchemical salt into his gur here, into his wound, but I mean, I'm kind of a fan of macro photography, and I know that there's a guy named Frank Percy Smith that not only was he able to take close-up pictures of very small items, he even made movies. He made movies in the early 1900s, like 1910, of flies in motion, of spiders in motion, like macro photography. So the camera that this guy's talking about using was, I think, from like 1976, 1978. And the homunculus experiment, he claims, took place around 1982, right around the same year as that Essentia article with the waterwork had come out. So there's really no excuse why the camera that he was using wasn't able to create macro photography, especially if a camera made 80 years prior to this experiment even taking place had the capability to take an in-focus photograph of something at the micro level.
No, I agree with you, but he wasn't pure heart, so that's why he wasn't able to make it work, dude. So again, I'm not saying it wasn't possible. I do think that, hey, it's a lot of source, trust me, bro. So I don't know where I stand with this, but could it have been possible? I mean, I think so, dude. I'm not going to throw out the homunculus with the girl water, if you know what I'm saying, and say that he didn't achieve this. And just because he couldn't get a picture doesn't mean it didn't happen. I mean, I've seen a UFO before and didn't take a picture, but I know what I saw that day, Thomas. Okay. And it was a UFO. All right. So if he didn't get it, I'm gonna take his word for it.
Like, we kind of have no other choice. That's the only thing you can go on, right?
And that's pretty much the end of the book. He says that Regardie took it. So he says, the following week I discussed the matter with Regardie. Till this day, I am not certain who took my failure harder, Regardie or Fredo Albertus. He told me he had hopes because of this work and that he actually believed the experiment could be pulled off successfully. So what do you think, bro? Like what do you think after what were your thoughts reading this? What were your thoughts after this? Like, do you think the listeners will be able to bring this thing into reality, or like,
if they're pure of heart, and I assume that most of our readers are pure of heart, the ones that actually pay attention and care about the truth with 2 capital T's. Well, as I was reading this, especially towards the end, when you realize it's all going to go south, I almost imagine that this would make a really good Lifetime movie, like the homunculus that loses it all towards the end. And I heard like the piano music in the back of my head as I was reading that very last day, and I could kind of see him trying to like shake its little hand and maybe like doing little chest compressions with his fingertips or something.
Buddy.
Yeah, like it really is. It turns into an absolute drama, right? It's no longer a comedy at that point.
He died. Just wake up.
Who's the guy that gets famous for doing little video shorts where someone dies and he cries and like snot comes out of his nose and stuff as he's like crying? Like, we should have that guy reenact discovering his homunculus as
I don't know who that is.
Oh, you'll know. You'll absolutely know. Well, if you were pure heart, you would know who that is.
It just makes me think of you ever seen that show Intervention? The one meme,
yeah, the black guy.
The guy, he like cries like mad weird.
Like, how do you not know who this guy is? It literally is just British. If you just search British guy crying,
I've never seen that guy's videos, dude.
And this is all he does is he screams and he cries. But this was literally what I was imagining when I was reading these last pages of the homunculus. That this guy walks in,
were you
and
crying?
He finds his little buddy. I might have shed a tear as I read that. How could you not? You'd have to be an absolute monster to not cry over the loss of this homunculus. I mean, it was literally a human child as he described it.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that it kind of pulled up my heartstrings too when I first read this book. You know, I was like, hey, so much time, energy, literally blood, sweat, and semen, poured into this, and for it to just be over in a second as it was. But what are your final thoughts? Do you believe more strongly in the homunculus after reading this book? What would you rate this book? On a scale to 1 homunculus, like, where do you stand? After all this.
Oh, I'll give it like a mid score, 5 out of 10 homunculi, just because it makes very specific promises, but then it kind of covers the stuff up. For example, he doesn't even provide in this book a picture of the waterwork crustacean. We had a fish that, no pun intended, we had to fish the picture of that thing out, and it was not easy to find the cover to that magazine.
Or the
And
drawings.
if this is the example of the thing that you finally did after decades of research, so you're like, oh my God, I'm finally onto something, I can generate life. Why wouldn't you include that pic? I would like people that I just meet on the street, it would be like, hey, nice to meet you. Here's a picture of artificial life that I made. Like I would be giving it to everybody. And if I wrote a book about it, I think I would put it like there on the cover, or at least like a black and white print of it somewhere in the book. And I don't know, like maybe I rely too much on the visual, right? But I mean, even Israel Regardie, he didn't believe that a homunculus was possible until someone showed him a really convincing photograph, and that changed his whole mind. So to not take that lesson that he got directly from his mentor and incorporate it into what might be his magnum opus, or at least describing the work towards his magnum opus, it just fell a little bit flat for me. It felt like, what are you hiding, or why don't you want to show? Hey, how about this? Why don't you just give us the blurry photos that you did take, right? Even if it was too blurry, we might be able to use AI at this point to sort of put it back in the focus. But alas, all of that information is gone forever.
Yeah, I think that this book is, I would rate it a 5 to 5.5. I actually hyped this book up more than, after reading it again, kind of falls flat. I like the guy's writing. I don't think it's bad, but you'll pick up on the tone.
Particularly great writing.
You'll pick up on the tone of like, this guy kind of seems pretty cocky about his work, and the whole fact that he was talking about like, oh, people in my classes that weren't even able to make the Herbal Stone are writing about alchemy nowadays. How dare they? Like, I know the truth, and like I was the real star of the show and the pupil of the class. Like I was that guy.
Well, he was a bad boy too, because him and his friend would get up early and do the lesser banishing ritual, and then they would go to class, and Frater would be like, "Who was doing the lesser banning ritual? You're not allowed to do magic at Hogwarts." And they were like, "How did he know?"
I think that was Regardie that you're talking about, the lesser banishing ritual.
Well, I mean, by proxy, right? By proxy, because the whole process, I guess, takeaway that I got from this book is that there would be no Lisiewski without having a Regardie, and there'd be no Regardie without having a Frater Albertus, right? So that they're almost passing on this lineage, even to the point of the end of the book, is that the homunculus that he was making almost felt like a child or grandchild of Regardie and of Frater Albertus, right? Like they all felt they had the same investment.
They were uncles.
So I don't know if that was an informational flow, or maybe like somehow their semen were all linked in some way, so that it truly was sort of like a joint homunculus. He doesn't really get into the details.
Yeah, well, there were the alchemical uncles of this thing, and even Regardie, who had lung issues throughout his whole life, and when he tried to, again, he was such a bad alchemist that he breathed in I forgot what sulfide it was, or some gas from trying to create the Philosopher Stone, or one of the tinctures, antimony or something. That's how dumb he was at doing alchemy, that he actually burned his lungs from the inside out, and he had respiratory issues his whole life because of it. And then he figured, because that happened to him, there was only one answer for the Philosopher's Stone, and that it was a spiritual thing that you could acquire, not a physical.
Right. If I can't do it, then maybe it's not possible at all. Well, meanwhile, he sounded like he was Jesse Pinkman and not Walter White.
100%. Like, that's the way I see it too. So I think, I don't know, man. I think that it might be bullshit, but I can't 100% rule it out. I can't, like, something in me still says like, maybe there's something more to this homunculus than meets the eye. And maybe seeing is believing, but you also have to be pure at heart. So, but the listeners will try this, and they're going to report back, and they're going to tell us if it's real or not, dude. And if you make a homunculus after listening to this, I will make it the official mascot of the podcast. Okay. And yeah, so do you want to add anything else, Thomas, before we get on?
Yeah, I guess I understand that he's upset at the end, and maybe I'm still ignorant of all the rules of a homunculus, but I believe that the whole point of creating a homunculus is to kill the homunculus. Like, you're not supposed to let it live.
You don't always have to. And by the way, this was in sometime around 1982.
Right. So,
So-
have the rules changed that now you're allowed to let a homunculus live into old age? Like, would a homunculus die of old age? And what is an old age for a homunculus? Because
So
Paracelsus made it seem like if you let that thing live for more than like 12 months, then you're going to create a monster.
but there aren't any rules that you have to get rid of it. You can keep it around and you can make it into your servant, and if you do let it grow into old age, it'll become either a giant or a dwarf or a mystical being, a magical being. And I don't think homunculus can die, bro, because they're magic. But if you want to extract those godlike powers from the homunculus, then that's when you have to get into, that's when you have to get rid of it and then use its various body parts. So really,
Well,
it's up to
from
you.
being a clump of gray matter cells into an actual homunculus. This almost feels like the abortion debate all over again, right? if it can't be killed, then technically it's not a homunculus if you can drown it with your blood.
All homunculus lives matter. That's the moral of the story here, dude. And they all deserve a chance to live. But if you choose to take, the dark path and get rid of it, you're still going to acquire magical powers because you're going to be able to use its bodies. So the homunculus is it's recyclable. It's reusable energy, I guess. And yeah, but there isn't any rules saying that you can't unalive it, bro. You're wrong there. You don't have to. Okay, so if you do create this homunculus, you don't have to get rid of it. You can turn it into child protective services probably, and let it have the life it deserves. You know what I mean? And give it a good shot in this world. And who knows? It might grow up to be the president of the United States one day. You don't know where. If you get rid of it so soon, you don't know if that homunculus could have solved world hunger.
It could have been a surgeon, could have been a doctor, could have been president. You're right.
Dude, it could have been a crazy president or a crazy scientist or doctor, how you're saying. Yeah. So, but again, just play it by ear when you do this and see where it goes and follow your heart. Ultimately, it's all about following your heart and really sticking to your guns and giving everything you have 110%, even your semen and your blood. So
yeah, you got to give it to that Gur.
Very, very inspirational, this book, because this guy he was walking the walk and talking the talk.
Really, to me, it was the opposite of inspirational, because at the end, it's like, and despite all of the success, all of these things that I've been able to do that no other alchemist before me has been able to do as well, I still think that I would have not done it all if I could try again, and I just would have gotten a job doing, high profile marketing work
and focusing on making money. Yeah.
And not having a kid with your wife for 4 decades.
It takes the alchemist road is a lonely one, and only the select few will succeed. And if that's what it takes to succeed, you got to do what you got to do, right? And I respect that. So for those on this endeavor, if you do succeed in this work, hit us up. Let us know how it goes. Take plenty of pictures, maybe even live stream it. We'll do a live stream and see what happens, dude.
You're just going to get pictures of people and doing unspeakable things with mud.
With hot dog water. So what else you got, bro?
Well, Occult Book Club is back. I can't believe the last one we did was Bach Saga, but
yes,
hopefully we'll be posting maybe like a list of suggested books that we'll be plucking from, along with some of the ones that we've already covered. But just be prepared. Hold on to your seats. Hold on to your Gur. Hold on to your semen and your pelicans. And we're going to have way more of these scheduled for you guys.
Yeah, the next book will probably be the Adam Weishaupt book on the
historical Jesus, where he claims that Germany's greatest theological entry into the world was their research into the historical concept of Jesus as a man. So that one's kind of interesting.
So hopefully it's got some juice in it. But yeah, make sure to follow me on social media at the Juan Podcast, www.tjojp.com, Cultus Mundi, Patreon, all that stuff. And yeah, plug your stuff, Thomas.
ParanoidAmerican.com, occultbookclub.com, all the things. And if you're listening to the audio version of this, make sure you go and follow the Paranoid American podcast too. Me and Juan intentionally don't recycle each other's guests like a million other people in this space. So you'll get a nice, healthy variety of stuff between the two of us.
Yes. So, as always, everyone, catch you on the next one.
They said it was forbidden. They said it was dangerous. They were right. Introducing the Paranoid American Homunculus Owner's Manual. Dive into the arcane, into the hidden corners of the occult. This isn't just a comic. It's a hidden tome of supernatural power. All original artwork illustrating the groundbreaking research of Juan Ayala, one of the only living homunculologists of our time. Learn how to summon your own homunculus, an enigma wrapped in the fabric of reality itself, their power at your fingertips, their existence, your secret. Explore the mysteries of the Aristotelian, the spiritual, the Paracelsian, the Crowleyan homunculus. Ancient knowledge lost to time, now unearthed in this forbidden tale. This comic book holds truths not meant for the light of day. Knowledge that was buried, feared, and shunned. Are you ready to uncover the hidden? The Paranoid American Homunculus Owner's Manual, not for the faint of heart. Available now from Paranoid American. Get your copy at tjojp.com or paranoidamerican.com today.
Paranoid. I scribble my life away, driven to write the page. Will it enlighten your brain? Give you the flight, my plane, paper, the highs ablaze. Somewhat of an amazing feel when it's real to real. You will engage it. Your favorite, of course, the Lord of an arrangement. I gave you the proper results to hit the pavement. If they get emotional, hey, maybe your language, a game, how they playing it well without Lakers. Evade them, whatever the cost, they are the shapeshift. Snakes get decapitated, metas the apex. Execution of flame you out, nuclear bomb distributed at war, rather gruesome for eyes to see. Max them out, then I light my trees. Blow it off in the face, you're despising me for what though? Calculated and rather cutthroat. Paranoid American must be all the blunt smoke for real. Lord, give me a day away, vacate. They wait around to hate whatever they say. Man, it's not in the least bit. We get heavy rotate when the beat hits, so thank us, you're welcome. Fuck the niggas for real, you're welcome. They ain't never had a deal, you're welcome. Man, they lacking appeal, you're welcome. Yet they doing it still, you're welcome.